Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with BlueBearFlutes and BlueBearFlutes.com, our website where you'll find the latest and greatest Native American flutes available on the market today. I just thought I'd throw that out there because oftentimes people say, where can I get a Native American flute? Or who made your flute? Or where are your flutes for sale at? I'll hear that in some of my videos, whether they be on TikTok, Instagram, or here on YouTube, and people will just be completely, I hate to say oblivious, but unknowing, is that the politically correct way to say that, of where my website is, even though I mention the beginning and the ending of every single video. And I'll try to say BlueBearFlutes.com somewhere in the middle of the video as well, because there are little bots and web crawlers and spiders and snakes and all kinds of things on the internet that are listening for that. Lots of foreshadowing. Anyway, today's video is 5 common phrases people say about the Native American flute and what they actually mean. This, I hope, helps out, I would love to say, the younger group, but actually what I'm hoping it'll help out are first-time flute players, people who aren't familiar with a lot of these different words and what have you. If you hear them, or if you hear someone saying them, at least it'll give you kind of a clue into what they're talking about, so that you don't have to feel left out of the conversation. I'd like to stop right there and tell you, one of my close friends from high school went to work for IBM. And before he worked for IBM, he worked at a computer store for a few years. Now, keeping in mind, I'm almost 53 years old, so this has been a minute or two ago. Actually, not too long, I guess I would say, after IBM really was the thing, but truthfully, one of my friends actually is in his 80s, and he is the person who is responsible for IBM having their computers built in China. So there's a lot of time lag between his age and my age, and things that have transpired therein, or there between, if that's the right way to say it. But in any case, my friend that used to work for IBM that I went to high school with, he used to tell me to beware of any computer technicians that had a grab bag or a little pocket with technical terms in it. And that's how I grew up after that point in my life, was thinking, you know, people that use these catchphrases, buzzwords, stuff you hear on the news, anything like that, somebody has got, you know, my interests are not in their best interest, I guess, is what I'm looking at. But anyway, they use these words, and I've always thought to myself that when people use buzzwords or something like that, they're either people who don't know any better, people who just only know that word, or the other kind, which are typically what I consider most people to be. But in any case, if you've been around the Native American flute for a while, you probably heard a few of these phrases and words. I know some of them seem really technical or supernatural or mystical, but you know, the question is, what do they really mean? Today I'm going to break down these 5 most common things people say about the flutes, and some of them, like I say, are true, some of them are kind of misunderstood, and some of them are just, you know, I don't want to say people are taking advantage of you, so just keep in mind, I don't want to say that. So, Mode 1 and Mode 2. Is it a real thing? Yes, it's a real thing. Was it historically a real thing? Probably not. I've got videos on the way that original 6-hole flutes were played, and I'll be honest with you, I believe that the historic 6-hole flutes, this is a 5-hole of course, but there would be another fingering right there on modern 6-hole flutes. The historic 6-hole flutes played just like this, all the way to the top, and you didn't keep your finger covering that 3rd hole, as you do with most of your flutes. That anybody's watching this video, 90% of you have those kind of flutes. So if you can imagine a flute that played the scale correctly without keeping a finger covering that hole there, that's what I'm talking about. I've got a lot of other videos about this, feel free to check them out. But I think that when the modern rendition of the 6-hole flute came about, that people started trying to find different ways to play it. And so with experience from various flutes or instruments that they had at hand that they were familiar with, they decided to adjust it a little bit. So they adjusted their playing, and that's why they kept their 3rd fingering covered all the time, because once again, historical 6-hole flutes don't seem to have fit that pattern, if you know what I mean. The two 6-hole flutes I have currently today available on my website, they're not like that. You play them from bottom to top, uncovering all holes without leaving an extra finger covered up, and it plays just like this one did. So mode 1 and mode 2, I believe, though it is a real thing, evolved mainly out of the necessity of figuring out what to do with those extra holes. And for that reason, they learned if you didn't cover the third fingering and you covered the second or third from the bottom, that you could play another minor scale. Truthfully, you can still do that on this 5-hole flute. You just don't play it in that particular fashion. As a matter of fact, the additional notes in that particular scale that they were playing are just additional chromatic notes that are available on all flutes. 4-hole flutes, 5-hole flutes, 6-hole flutes all play it. So mode 1 and mode 2, a real thing, not magical, not something that I ever try to promote, because, you know, if you want to play a chromatic scale, you play the chromatic scale. If you want to play the major tonic of the scale, I've got videos on all this stuff. Oh my gosh, we've been making videos for so long. But anyway, let's get to our next topic. Concert tuned. One of my favorite questions people would ask me. They don't ask anymore, but I guess it was about 15 years ago they would ask, is this flute concert tuned? Because that was really the buzzword at the time. Concert tuned, and this, I'm going to be really technical with you. If you've watched my tuner on any of my videos, you'll notice that there are little numbers past the middle line. The numbers go that way, and then they start over and go that way. So you can be sharp this many numbers, or you can be flat this many numbers, and what those numbers are what we call cents. Cents are just how far away from the actual true intonation of whatever frequency. It doesn't matter if it's 432, 528, 440, or if you just pick some frequency out of a hat and set your tuner to tune it that. As long as that straight up and down is what that frequency is, 440, 432 for example, and if it goes 3 numbers to the right, that's 3 numbers or 3 cents sharp. Concert tuning is no more than 15 cents sharp. There's a problem with that, and we're going to talk about that on one of the next videos that we have going on big time. But for right now, I'm going to tell you that everybody plays this instrument. I could hand this flute to another flute player and they would play it sharp or flat based on their experience. If the other flute player was skilled, they would play it with what their ears say is in tune based on their experience level. But, you know, not all flute players are like really the most excellent flute players. You eventually evolve into this, whether you like it or not. But as I have made other videos, even I think one of my last 2 videos I put out talked about how you control the pitch of your flute. So you can hear that I can make the flute go sharp, flat, or play at the level that sounds like it's appropriate, like versus. And yes, I'm using different amounts of air, but at the same time, in my mind, I know that this sounds right and that sounds wrong. So I typically play with the amount of air and the amount of air pressure that is required to make it sound the way it should. That having been said, a beginner flute player may play less than the way that I'm playing. They may use less air or too much air. I've experienced beginners that start off both ways, especially on the powwow circuit. And my kids always say, look at those kids and how they're playing the flute, because little kids, they've got so much gusto, they're so excited to do this, and they put it all into that flute. So their sharpness is beyond what the tuner can actually understand. But anyway, concert tune doesn't have to be a mystical sound. I'll give you an example. A lot of times you'll hear someone say, oh, this flute is concert tuned, so that's why it's $100 more. When in reality, as long as my flute is within 15 cents of sharp or flat of whatever frequency, 440 for example, that this one's tuned at, then it's concert tuned. However, you may not be able to play it concert tune, which is a whole nother video for a whole nother error. Not era. But anyway, so concert tuned with this instrument, one that the air pressure controls the tonality of the flute altogether. You know, concert tuned it's a thing, but it requires a skilled flute maker to concert tune a flute in a way, and not just call it that, mind you. I mean, somebody could call something concert tuned and, you know, it may not be, but with a medium amount of air, that's not, or with a medium amount of air, that middle way, if the flute is at 440, then that's concert tuned. And if it's 440 plus 15 or minus 15 cents, still concert tune. That's what that all boils down to. So I hope maybe that one helps, but honestly, you know, it doesn't have to be concert tuned for you to enjoy it. You know, really a solo flute player, just really, I'm always hearing Chief Bobby John's voice in my head, just play the flute. You know, you don't have to worry about what frequency it's in and whether it's this or that, because honestly, most of the people that start off that have some notion that they want to play 432 hertz because it's the tone of the earth, which of course, you know, I've got videos on that, I won't discuss it now, but people that want to play 432, when they first pick a flute up, they're going to be playing all over the place, not 432. Not to mention the fact that only the note A is actually the only 432. Everything else is on a sliding scale. Some of those notes may be in complete contrast to the tone of the earth. So, FYI, like I said, concert tuned, it's an idea, it's real, it's an idea though, and it could be an example of that third group of people that I was mentioning that use those words, because, you know, people try to sell something based on its goodness, and if it's not good, they'll still try to sell it on its goodness. So they might even make that good up. Anyway, the pentatonic minor scale. This is my third little phrase I want you to know about. The pentatonic minor scale is simply a 5-note scale. People have said this is the reason that you can't hit a bad note. So if you've ever played this instrument before, or if you've not, and you wanted to play it and it's in the pentatonic minor scale and you're wondering exactly what the heck that means, it means, those are 5 notes right there, all covered, and then uncover one at a time till you get to that note. This note is an octave of the bottom note, so this is all pentatonic down here. This note here is still pentatonic because it's a duplicate of that one. If I played a duplicate of that note or a duplicate of that note, still pentatonic, and minor, of course. So it's kind of like the black keys on a piano. So not hitting a bad note. I'm going to play some random notes that I know for a fact I've never played before. Brace yourself. Those are chromatic notes. Not really Native American flute sounding, but and that's just playing up and down the scale. So once again, I've got a lot of videos about how to come up with songs, how to understand music, practicing scales, why scales are important for beginners, my whole 12-week course on flute playing, all that's on my YouTube channel and certainly could help you. You know, if you're interested in learning more about the scale and the scales and what they mean and what they are. But minor pentatonic, that's just the name of the typical scale that most of these Native American flutes today are tuned in. You can find one or two tuned in a major key, but they won't sound like what you consider a Native American flute to sound like. So keep that in mind. The native scale, my fourth phrase. I hear people all the time say the native scale or the native frequency. And there is no native frequency, and there really is no native scale. You know, it's actually Pythagoras. I've said his name so many times, you guys just have to trust me on this, or look it up. Pythagoras created the modern scales that we play in most music today. So modern musicians play with the help of the Pythagorean music system, I guess we could say. So does that mean that people that came along before Pythagoras weren't using notes in his scales? No, it doesn't mean that. As a matter of fact, the native scale will actually be something we talk about on the next catchphrase here in just a moment, number 5, the last one. But the native scale just doesn't really exist. Historically, Native Americans, my people, your people, whoever's people that are from the United States, Mexico, Canada, Alaska, South America, the islands, all thereby encompassed of Native Americans. We did not have, to my knowledge, or anyone else's, a tuner. And for that reason, we didn't tune flutes to specific scales. So typically, you know, what people consider to be a native scale would be the previous catchphrase. The minor pentatonic scale is considered a native scale. Before the Native American flute really got big, it was considered an Asian scale. And there's similarities, and one day we'll talk culture, but it's not today. But I don't believe in the Bering Strait theory. That's another, boy, that's a big talk we'll have there. But anyway, the native scale, there's not really one. So different regions, people had different size materials, which yielded different tones of flutes. Some people from central United States area, for example, that historically we're pretty sure they came from central Mexico area, they had a flute that played with 2 holes. And so that flute doesn't exactly play a minor pentatonic scale. It does play a lot of the notes of the minor pentatonic scale, but it was also very tiny because of the material they had to make it with. And you know, it's kind of interesting. It's a wonderful flute. I think I've made one video with it. I'll be doing more in the near future and showing how to make them, because I've got lots of friends from a couple of those tribes that are interested in learning how to make some of their historic flutes. But in any case, you know, it really depends. The native scale is really kind of a misnomer. So, you know, we can call this a native scale, but is it really? Not really. And was there historically and accurately depicted native scale? Not really. And then finally brings us down to my 5th one of my favorite ones, traditional tuning, which I believe I may have helped perpetuate the coinage of the phrase traditional tuning. People eventually started calling it grandfather tuning, but traditional tuning is not a particular scale. It is usually a rudimentary minor pentatonic scale from phrase 3 that is played on a Native American flute, typically, number 4, and then number 5, the traditional tuning is just basically tuned by ear. So depending on how you started tuning flutes, if you're a flute maker, depending on if you're in a community of people that do the same thing, your teacher, how it is that they passed it down to you, you know, it sounds like a sacred and old school catchphrase, but truthfully, it's just the way we describe today the way people used to tune flutes. Traditional tuning is a method, not a scale. I guess that's probably the best way to sum it up. So if you need to hear that again, traditional tuning is a method and not a scale. So is there a flute that is in a traditional key? No. Is there a flute that was tuned in a traditional manner? Yes. And for that reason, for years, I had people, and I'll never forget this. I've got to tell you this one. For years, I had people contact me and say, I want the flute that is the sound sample for the A-flat flute on your website. And so, I kid you not, I've told a number of customers that have asked for that flute, a very lengthy description, but not one I'm going to share here, but I'll give you the short version of it. But basically, I have a note on my computer that says make all sound samples sound like this sound sample, and it's the A-flat tuning sound sample. It was because of the song I was playing and the way I was playing it that people all fell in love with that particular scale. And people have a notion that they think A-flat is great because it's closer, you know, 440 A-flat flute is closer to 432, but it's not. You know, we're still, what is that, 12, 4, we're still 4 hertz away from being an actual 432 flute, so it's still off from that. Does that mean that A-flat is the tone of the earth? No. It just means when I played that song for that sound sample, people loved it. And they've, even in the last month, I've had somebody, I don't know where they found that sound sample at, but they asked me for a flute in A-flat. And I'm like, well, all you have to do is buy our A flute and send me a note asking for it to be A-flat. So That's basically where that goes. So that's my own personal experience. I'd love to hear any of your experiences with any of these catchphrases. If you have had someone, I mean, you know, jokingly, the next 3 things we're going to talk about here real briefly are something I told my wife. I said, you know, we should really call this video How to Become the President of a Flute Circle. But, most of you, many of you, I guess, know that I've had difficulties accepting flute circles. I also have difficulties accepting drumming circles, and you guys are welcome to go to those. I don't disrespect you for it at all, but coming from the culture and the, you know, being raised like I was, I cannot accept a whole flute circle or a drumming circle thing. They just don't work for me. If they work for you, I am happy for you. I'm not asking you to stop. In fact, I'm asking you to continue doing that, because if it's working for you, you know, do what works is my motto. But let me give you these bonus buzzwords. These are some of my favorites. This is one I usually get from new flute makers, the SAC. And jokingly, you know, please forgive me, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Whenever somebody asks me about the SAC, I usually add a K to the end of it. And that's 90s humor right there. So when they say it's the SAC, they mean the slow air chamber. You know, I hate to say this, but my fluid dynamic studies were such that, to me, what people call the slow air chamber is most definitely not. This should be the slow air chamber. But, you know, I'm not here to change that. I mean, if y'all want to call it the SAC, the SAC, that's fine. Slow air chamber, but anyway, that's where you'll hear people are talking about the air chamber up here that's not, you know, technically not necessarily integral of the flute. This is integral of the flute. If I cut the flute off right here, I can still play it, make a sound. If I cut the flute off right here, I can't make anything out of this except for, and that's all you'll hear. So, and then there's my hecklers back there in the background saying, well, that's still a sound. Please write that down. Please make a comment to that. I got to hear you say it. I miss you guys. But anyway, then there's another one, the Fipple. And there are people that'll say this is a Fipple flute. And that's kind of right. And so I guess for the last 3 or 4 years, getting close to 4 years, I've been studying Norwegian. I haven't come across the word Fipple yet, but I have Googled it years and years ago. Fipple is a horse's lip. And people, I guess, eventually in the fluting community, I think before Native American flutes really hit big within the last 100 years, people have been saying Fipple for a while. But do I agree with it? No, no. Fipple is just a fancy word that somebody that is akin to that computer technician my best friend used to tell me about, that they'll just pull out of their pocket and it's a Fipple, because you've never heard of that. That's why they call it a Fipple. So anyway, there are people who will call this block the Fipple. There are people who will call this mouthpiece the Fipple, which is where a horse would put his Fipple. And then there are people who would call it correctly, which is this little area right here. But calling it the splitting edge not only helps those of you who don't know what these fancy Norwegian terms are. Let's see if I can remember how to say that in Norwegian. I better not hurt those brain cells. I need those too. But anyway, you know, if you don't know what the fancy, you know, Fipple word is, this is the splitting edge. This is where the sound hole, the hole that the sound comes out of. Check it out. That's where the sound comes out of. So easy peasy. So it's the sound hole, the splitting edge. I used to call it the knife edge, but more people have accepted splitting edge, and so that's why I call it that from now on. Plus there's a band called Knife Party, which I really like, and most of you are scratching your heads right now, but they're my kind of music. I like to listen to them. And then finally, this is one of the wonderful ones. Well, let me tell you too, because when we made all my notes for this, I really wanted to say this one thing. People that say Fipple typically are people who read a Wikipedia article on it. And I mean, you no disrespect, you Fipple people, but that's how the Fipple flops. So the next word though is my favorite and why we saved it for last. And amongst other Native American flute playing community, no matter what race they're from, you know, they're Native American flute community is its own group. Some of us no matter where we're from, once again, it's not a cultural thing, it's an adaptation thing, I guess, but when you call this piece up here the fetish, many of us will chuckle. And I will usually chuckle the hardest, not to embarrass you, although embarrassment is a good teacher. I've learned a lot from that myself. But a fetish is more or less, I don't know, you just get weird looks from people whenever you say that if they don't know the context, you know. And I'm going to spell it out. A fetish may be, let's say you like feet, okay? I'm not going to judge. Well, I can't unless you post it in the comments, and please keep those comments clean. But anyway, fetish, I don't know. I'm not quite sure where this one come from. I do know it existed, and you know, I think it's the piece that embellishes something, and because the word embellish sounds important, but it's got a few extra syllables, maybe they would rather say fetish and feel like they've accomplished the same means. So to people that are multilingual or monolingual or what have you, the word fetish has its own account, and you know, if you use it in the wrong context, it might sound kind of funny. But to be honest with you, the 1 or 2 people a year that I have contacted me about different flute totems and wanting them to be a flute fetish, it brings a whole, oh my gosh, it's a lot of ideas anyway, and I'm trying to keep this G-rated. It's hilarious, but not my word for it, I'll say that. So I like to call it a totem, the flute block, because you know, this is not really a totem per se on this one. You can call it the bird, which every time I hear the bird, I always remember that kid in that high school class that told me that's why that's called the jumping bird, because it's your bird finger. But anyway, just a technique that I do, but you know, more videos on that. So in any case, now you have an idea of what some of those fancy words are, what they really mean. Have you heard any other ones? Sounded impressive or maybe just confusing? I would love to know what you have heard otherwise. I'm sure there's a bunch of them. And get off the fetish thing. Just let that one go. You know, it's just funny, and we have to laugh, and then we're done. But if you would drop them in the comment section for me, I might include them in a future video. I mean, you know, if you guys put enough of those comments in here, we could make a whole video out of it. But no, definitely would include things like that you say in a future video that we make. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all those things that keep us YouTubers making YouTube. And hopefully this has answered a lot of your questions about what these things are that people have been saying. So once again, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for BlueBearFlutes and BlueBearFlutes.com. Hope to see you here again really soon.